All right, today I'm going to talk about a problem that I recently have had with my 2012 Husaberg TE300. Last couple rides I did a lot of downhill, and I ran out of rear brake. The brake faded on two different rides. The second ride, if I'd have been smart, prior to that ride, I'd have bled the brakes, but I didn't get around to it. But anyway, I did finally get around to it. And what I wanted to point out is how this cap works that goes on your rear brake reservoir, and the bladder that's inside of it, the O-ring that goes on the cap. And if you got to buy one of these things, the only thing you can do is buy the whole kit. You can't just buy the bladder. You can buy this O-ring, but for whatever reason, that O-ring sells for like $7 on Rocky Mountain ATV. I don't think there's anything special about it. It might be Viton, whatever, but I'm sure you can get it. You can get probably a dozen of them for that price. Anyway, I smeared this when I cleaned this off with some brake cleaner, but it's called rear brake cylinder cover CPL 04, whatever. Part number 5481306210. Pretty much fits, I don't know, a lot of years, a lot of models of KTMs. It's a Brembo part. Anyway, this bladder inside is a very important piece, because what it does is this cap is actually vented. If you look down here, you can see a hole here, and then if I turn it around, see a hole here. And the purpose of that is so that the bladder, the top part of the reservoir can breathe, if you will, can expand and collapse. But the purpose of this little bladder is to keep the air that would come in through these vents or exhale through the vents from getting to your brake fluid. Brake fluid is hydroscopic. It wants to pull any water there is out of the air, any moisture. With us living out here in Colorado, it's a pretty dry climate, so it's not as much of an issue for us. But for those of you that might live in a more wet, humid climate, that's a pretty significant issue, and it's why you should change your brake fluid more often. Anyway, so this bladder fits on this. The O-ring fits down into the groove down here, okay? And, you know, it seals it, keeps the O-ring, keeps the fluid from coming out of the cap, and the bladder, as it seals around this edge, keeps fluid from coming out of the little vents. Now, that all works great until, I don't know if you can see it, until you get a hole in your bladder. Okay, you can see that? I got a hole in mine. I didn't know that. And so what happens is, as you use your brake or you ride, what's going to happen is fluid's going to go inside this bladder. And on occasion, you might see fluid come out the vents. That would be bad. And if fluid gets into the bladder, that means your reservoir doesn't have fluid to work the brake with. So as your brakes wear, the fluid level goes down. And what happens is, if you don't have enough fluid in there, you'll suck air into your hydraulic system, which is not a good thing. How this got a hole in it, I have no idea. I mean, this is a 2012 bike. It's got 9,700 miles on it and over 500 hours. But that's the first one of these I've ever seen do this. I have other KTM bikes here, and I've never seen the problem on them. So this is something you might want to look after whenever you're bleeding your brakes. Make sure that this little bladder doesn't get a hole in it, because if it does, that would be a bad thing. Now, I've did some research. I cannot find this bladder. If someone who watches this video can find one of these bladders, that would be great, because the whole assembly costs about $37. And really, the only thing I needed was a new bladder. Now there is a part number on here. It says 10.2711 dot, and it looks like 8.4. It could be a B4, but it looks to me like it's 8.4. Anyway, I did some Google searches for this, you know, trying to get it, and I can't find just this little bladder. The O-ring, it measures what appears to be about 1.7 millimeters thick, 24 millimeter OD, maybe approximately 21 millimeter ID. Again, that, you know, 24 minus 21 would be 3 millimeters, so maybe it's 1.5 millimeter thick. It's always kind of hard to measure these things. But anyway, I'm sure you can find one of these O-rings somewhere. That shouldn't be a problem. But apparently, finding one of these little bladders is a problem. So anyway, I figured I would go ahead and video this for you guys. It's just another one of those maintenance items that you don't see very often. But if you do get a hole in this bladder, you're going to have problems with your back brake. Your back brake's probably going to fade on you more often than it should. Anyway, all for now.